everyone. This is our first reading from Plato's Apology. It's called Plato's Apology because Plato wrote it. It's really the apology of Socrates, a real person, a friend, an older man that Plato knew. And Socrates never wrote anything. He talked. He talked with his friends. And after his death, Plato wrote dialogues, usually, using his friend Socrates as a character. How close things ever got to the living Socrates, we'll never know. This is not a dialogue primarily, very unusual for Plato's work. It is a speech. It purports to be the speech that Socrates actually made when he was accused of, what he's been accused of here. Whether it is anything like what Socrates said, that is, no one knows. But this is what it's presented as Socrates' defense speech. It's an apology in that sense. It's not an I'm sorry. It's an apology insofar it's an attempt to account for his life, an attempt to defend his life, not just defend it directly from the punishments that he's faced with, but to defend it in the sense that justify it, the justification, which is exactly what he does in this starting out sort of clever way where he says, you have to give me some slack here because I'm not used to speaking in public, making speeches like this. So if it's clumsy and awkward, you'll have to forgive me. This is not my style. And of course, he makes a brilliant speech. So there's some irony there, and maybe some attempts to, get on the right side of the jury. Even I don't know. That's a big question in this. Everybody who reads this, the apology is big question everyone has is how hard is Socrates actually working to be found innocent by the jury or not guilty by the jury. He's faced with some very serious charges, and they may not seem serious at first, but they're actually quite serious. And those charges are basically impiety and corruption of the youth. That is, not believing in the gods that the city believes in, which is a very serious charge, right? Impiety, kind of thing, the kind of subject, of course, that Euthyphro and he were talking about in last week's reading. And the corruption of the youth of Athens is also a very serious charge. It's a charge, for which you can be executed. And okay, I'll give it away. He was found guilty. I mean, the speech is a failure in that respect, if that's indeed what he's trying to do. One of the more interesting things in the beginning is when he says that I have two sets of accusers. I have the accusers who have brought me into court and have accused me of these things, and that's why I'm here. But he says I have a deeper, prior set of accusers because he's 70 years old. He's been doing this for decades. This thing that he does. And last week when we read the Euthyphro, we got a good sense of what it is that he actually does. He asks people about what they know and attempts to inquire with them into the nature of whatever the subject is to find the truth about it. That he has been doing this for quite a while, and he's become a kind of a notorious figure in Athenian public life, and he thinks that there are many, many misconceptions, if not outright lies, about him and what he does. So he says that before I can address these direct, immediate charges that have brought me to court, I have to address the prejudices that have built up about me over the many years that I've been part of Athenian life, basically. So I guess here on page 2, when he begins to do that, make it a little bigger. He says, I will begin at the beginning and ask what the accusation is, which has given rise to this slander of me and which has encouraged Meletus to proceed against me. Meletus is one of his accusers in court. What do the slanderers say? They shall be my prosecutors, and I will sum up their words in an affidavit. This is the imaginary charge against him, the deeper, more long-standing prejudices against him, which he thinks are obviously false, but he wants to defend himself. Socrates is an evildoer and a curious person who searches into things under the earth and in heaven and he makes the worse appear the better cause, and he teaches the aforesaid doctrines to others. A very, very interesting characterization. And again, he's sort of making this up. He's saying, well, this is generally speaking kind of prejudices that people have against me. Um, the first one, that he's a kind of a wizard or something, that he looks into things under the earth and in heaven. He says, I have nothing to do with it. I've never done that. The second one is interesting because it is a theme in Greek philosophy, early Greek philosophy especially. He makes the worse appear the better cause. That is actually very, very important in terms of what the public conception of Socrates was. There was a group of people who were associated with Socrates. He would not associate, he would not call himself one, but there was a group of people who became known as the Sophists. Sophist, sophist, which literally means wise one or wise man. And they were teachers of virtue or morality, and they were teachers of speech, public speech, which is very important in a place like Athens, which is a democracy. If you wanted to take part in politics, you really had to have the capacity to do public speaking because you had to persuade the masses, persuade the crowd. So these sophists were both admired and looked at in a very sort of diffident way. They're suspicious, and their critics would say that they make the worse appear the better argument, or hear the better cause, and that's interesting, right? As if to say, well, what these people do, Socrates included, is that they look at things that we all know to be true, and they, in words, prove them false, right? But they couldn't be false because we know that they're true. So Socrates is looked upon as something of a trickster in terms of his use of language. This ability to make the worse appear the better cause. And this is very much associated with what Socrates actually does do, and is to ask people to give explanations for what they know or for what they claim to know. And just the very act of questioning people on what they think is true, showing them that they don't really know what they're talking about, just like Socrates did with Euthyphro, was often characterized, I think, by this expression, making the worse appear the better cause or better argument. And that's, I think, quite important. Quite important aspect of what they're accusing Socrates of. And these other people, yeah, here he talks about other sophists like Gorgias and Callias, and others. He never says that he's a sophist, but he never says he's not a sophist. But then he says something interesting here. This is on page 3. I dare say, Athenians, that someone among you will reply, why is this, Socrates? What is the origin of these accusations of you? For there must have been something strange in what you have been doing. All this great fame and talk about you would never have arisen if you had been like other men. Tell us then why this is, as we should be sorry to judge hastily of you. Like, what basically Socrates is saying, an honest question like, what has brought me here? Why am I here? What have I done that has brought me here into this court where I've been indicted for these crimes? And his answer is quite interesting. And it begins with this story of his friend Chaerephon going to the Delphic oracle, the most important place in Greek religious life, probably the most important place in the world for the Greeks. It's where they would go to ask the god Apollo through his priestesses different questions and would get these sort of cryptic replies. His friend Chaerephon goes there and asks if there's anybody wiser than Socrates. And the oracle says no, there's no one wiser. And Socrates says, well, this is the beginning of everything. Because when I heard this, I had to find out what that meant. Because Socrates says, I know that I know nothing. I know I have no wisdom. small or great. What can he mean, the god Apollo, when he says that I am the wisest of men? So that's, he's telling a story which may or not be true about what put him on the path of doing the sort of things that have resulted in him ending up at the age of 70 in a court of law accused of these crimes. He was told that he's the wisest, and he is was puzzled by that many years ago, I guess, and tries to figure out what the oracle could possibly have meant. So he goes to different people and seeks people who are wiser than himself, and lo and behold, doesn't find any. That is, he goes to the politicians, he goes to the poets, he goes to the craftsmen, and in one way or another, they all fall short. And what is the most important outcome of this? Like right here, where he says, "So I left him." This is a person that he, asked about what this person knew, and was very disappointed when it seemingly this person didn't know anything, or at least anything worthwhile. So Socrates says, "So I left him, saying to myself as I went away, well, although I do not suppose that either of us knows anything really beautiful and good, I am better off than he is, for he knows nothing and thinks that he knows. I neither know nor think that I know. In this latter particular, then, I seem to have slightly the advantage of him." And that's really the general outcome of his questioning the people who in his community in Athens who supposedly did have wisdom and knowledge, finding out that they didn't, and realizing that if he has any wisdom, it's not in having any great knowledge; it's in the simple knowledge that he doesn't know, and that's such an important part of the Socratic outlook. Um, Therefore, I asked myself on behalf of the oracle, the Delphic oracle, whether I would like to be as I was, neither having their knowledge nor their ignorance, or like them in both. And I made answer to myself in the oracle that I was better off as I was. That is, better off, even though I know nothing, I'm better off knowing that I know nothing and not being deluded like all these other people into thinking that I knew when I don't know. That's such an important part of this text and such an important part of the Socratic message, you might say. Uh, so yeah, I mean, really interesting stuff here. Talking about here, he actually interrogates one of his accusers, Meletus, and tries to show that Meletus has no idea what he's doing, and that his charges are obviously not even well thought out, as well as being false, which is pretty funny. And how does the reading end? Uh, yes, but that is how it ends. And then go on to other things in the second reading.